Hello and welcome to the first ever book review on this channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing Dr. Oliver Sacks's An Anthropologist on Mars. Dr. Oliver Sacks was a neurologist who worked in the US, although was born and raised in the UK, and he was described by the New York Times as the poet laureate of contemporary medicine. And that this book and all of his works really exemplified that. Through his works, he's trying to teach us something deeper about the human psyche and about human nature, much like poetry. But this book itself is really just a collection of case studies of patients that he's met throughout his life and throughout his work, and what they can tell us about how the human mind and the human body can adapt to these incredibly difficult neurological conditions. He starts with just the very basic example of when you break your dominant arm or hand, you very quickly learn to become ambidextrous and write with the other hand. The brain does something very similar. Whilst it's stronger at a younger age, all of us still retain some neural plasticity that can be used to help us overcome these conditions or just help us adapt and live with them. I think this is really summed up wonderfully by a quote very early on in the book by William James, who says, nature is nowhere accustomed more openly to display her secret mysteries than in cases where she shows traces of her workings apart from the beaten path. And every single case study in this book is incredibly far out from the beaten path. I hope none of us watching this or myself ever experiencing anything like this. But all of them have learned to adapt, and all of them teach us something about the human condition. So each chapter talks about a different patient. The first is about a painter who loses his abilities to perceive colour. Another is about a surgeon who has Tourette's, which just dominates his life. It's a real core part of his self. But when he operates, the Tourette's symptoms just vanish. Another is about an idiot savant, as they're called, a young man that has intense autism, has real learning difficulties, but can draw exquisitely. And this, as Dr. Sacks explains, isn't a learned behavior. It's not a learnt ability. It's inherent. From a young age, from an incredibly young age, without any training, he can draw much, much, much better than most of us can. In our adult state. The chapter that I want to focus on is The Last Hippie. This is the one that resonated most with me, and it's about a young man who comes of age during the summer of love in New York, and he's at such a place at such a time that he sees Allen Ginsberg speak, he sees Timothy Leary speak, and he's there for some of these key moments throughout this part of history. But even after all these drug experiences he's had, he realizes that drugs can't provide the sort of spiritual outlook that he's looking for. So he becomes involved in a spiritual group in New York, and begins upon the path of enlightenment. And it goes pretty well. Some consider him to have obtained enlightenment, and others believe he's very well along the way to understanding the core of the self, and nirvana effectively, even so much that the group move him out to a temple that is outside of the city, and it's here that his parents lose contact with him, and several years later when they find him, and he agrees to see them, that they meet him and realize that it's not nirvana, it's not the teachings that he's absorbed that is making him quiet and introspective and spiritual. It's a tumor, and this tumor has grown so much that it has destroyed almost all of the higher functions of his brain, so much so that he has to be looked after 24/7, and has become an amnesiac. He can't form memories anymore. It's incredibly sad, and it goes deep to understanding of the human mind. But there is one beautiful moment that just made me like leap for joy almost, where Oliver Sacks takes him to a Glorious Dead concert, like his favorite band, and he's been in this institution for 20 years now. He has no understanding that he has lost all of this. All of this time has passed, so he thinks he's just going to see the contemporary Glorious Dead. But obviously all the music has changed. But the first half is the old set that they would do, and he's just enraptured by it. He's in love with the music, and Dr. Oliver Sacks is convinced that he holds some deeper memories from that concert. They're not conscious memories. As soon as the concert ends, he can't recall that he even went to the concert, but he has olfactory and auditory cues which allow him to relive subconsciously these memories and this experience. And it just goes to show how incredibly deeply we can adapt. Really, these aren't case studies in the traditional sense. There is much to learn about the patients as they are about to learn about the disease. And Sacks would go so far as to say that you can only learn about the disease through the patient. We're all so different and we all express symptoms in such different ways that it's only through understanding the breadth of human experience can we really understand the cause and effect of these diseases. Sacks is also trying to push back against this intense desire to medicalize everything. Medicine, pharmacological or not, has consequences that can be completely unexpected. Not all side effects are benign, and especially when you're talking about chronic neurological disorders, can be incredibly difficult to separate the psyche and the self. There's one moment where a patient with Tourette's, an individual with Tourette's, talks about having a Touretteized soul. So to give them medicine which reduces the symptoms of Tourette's, does that in some way diminish the self? And that patient would say yes, it does. And so Sacks's empathy really comes from his desire to understand the psyche, but also to understand some of his own experiences. He also experienced, towards the end of his life, macular degeneration, so he became almost blind, and the hallucinations that come along with that, as well as he had migraines and the color hallucinations and the shape hallucinations that often come during those attacks. Really, he wants to show us how diverse the human experience can be. And really, the spirit of this book and the idea of this book can really be summed up in another quote by Freeman Dyson, who says that nature's imagination is richer than our own. And really, this book shows that couldn't be more true.